Today on the Game Adventure, with hardware costs continuing to rise, is the solution in the cloud? Well, news of Amazon's Luna locking users out of their purchased games with no refunds points to maybe not. Is it time to ditch modern consoles and just go back to the Game Boy Advance? Let's talk about it. The Game Adventure podcast is a weekly, family-friendly show keeping you up to date on all the latest news in video games. We'll also mix in a heavy dose of nostalgia with retro games and even things like how the worlds of tech and culture and even faith interact with video games as an art form. We're doing it all in less than an hour every Saturday morning, so let's get started. Welcome everybody to episode 6 of the Game Adventure. I just want to thank you so much for taking some time to hang out with me today and over the last couple of weeks. If you've been commenting on various things that I've posted and emailing me, man, I appreciate you so much. Thank you for doing that. Part of my goal behind this podcast is just to kind of create a small community around video games and kind of talking about them in more of a positive light than a negative, while also kind of taking a wide look at the news and what's actually happening in the world of video games. I think it's an awesome hobby. I've enjoyed it my whole life long, and I'm excited to talk about some of what's going on with you this week. Not as many like studio closures, so that's good, but definitely a good chunk of news. So let's talk industry news. I know I said there wasn't as many layoffs, but there actually was some layoffs happening. So let's talk about that first and get it out of the way. Take-Two Interactive is the company who owns Rockstar. It's Rockstar's parent company. Rockstar is the company working on Grand Theft Auto. Basically, they have laid off a specific area, laid off the head of its AI division, along with kind of an undisclosed number of that staff. So this team in particular was focused on what they called like the cutting edge technology, including procedural content and machine learning. So what I would assume to be kind of the use of AI in the game making process, though not necessarily making the art and the assets for it. I don't know why that would be excluded, but basically looking at efficiency. And I think on the studio downsizing kind of thing, we'll continue to see this happening because the same things that are issues for these studios are common practices across the industry. And so it's kind of like when a lot of banks shut down in 2008 in the financial crisis. It was because of all these banks were making the same bad decisions. And so I think we're going to see some of that continue to happen, especially with parent companies making bad financial decisions and then cutting people because they're the easiest cut to make in these companies. We've talked about how they're not the wisest cut to make, but they're certainly the easiest. This kind of firing of the AI head kind of highlights the paradox of a company that has been trying to champion AI with cost efficiency and then also is shutting down its dedicated internal like AI wing right before GTA 6. So my question, I think, timing-wise, is are we getting rid of the folks who set up the AI that we used as a part of this game? And now we're just kind of getting rid of them now that the game is, for the most part, done? I hope not. I hope that even a game like Grand Theft Auto 6, which I have no intent of playing, it's not my jam. I just don't think it definitely doesn't fall in line with my values. And so I kind of just steered clear of all of the Grand Theft Auto games as a side note. But I hope that an enormous project like that has been using tons and tons of creative human beings to make it and not AI. That's my thought there. The next story is the opposite of depressing. It's actually kind of awesome. There's an assembly or kind of a co-op forming of a couple of indie developers who are forming what they're calling the Nova Assembly. And they aren't merging. So this isn't like a merger of 5 studios. This is like a pooling of technology and financial backing and like specialist developers to kind of form this co-op to protect themselves against volatility and layoffs in the industry. They say a big studio is able to easily lay off people. And we're forming a co-op because we can't lay off each other. And so we're going to go into this together. And I think this is awesome. This is probably what the game industry needs to see more of because you end up with companies that are behind these awesome, still like indie titles. So very original thinking, original arts, like very unique, which is what I love about video games, is when you see this game that's like, whoa, this is unlike anything I've ever experienced before. And basically, these folks are locking arms and they're saying, we're going to go into this together. We're going to share our resources and we're going to make the world of video games and the worlds that we're creating in video games better for it. And we're going to encourage each other and support each other. So I love this idea. Basically, it's a survival strategy. The developers are kind of trying to build their own publishing arm and share the burden of these creative risks that they take by nature. So it'll be exciting to see what comes out of that. And maybe this is a blueprint that others in the industry can follow. Going back to AI, PUBG Studios, their head guy and their parent company, Krafton, have been kind of following along the Crimson Desert's AI controversy. So if you didn't see this, Crimson Desert got called out for having a few small pieces of artwork that players saw and said, that's an AI creation. And when the developers went in and found these pieces, they said, oh, we're going to fix it, actually, because we didn't want AI to be in this game in this way. So that's kind of cool that they responded that way, especially a world as detailed as Crimson Desert is. They wanted that to not be an AI-generated kind of thing. And so what happened this week was the head of PUBG Studios said, essentially, they're okay with using AI as a tool. He kind of pushed back on that because he said it's just a tool. AI is just a tool like Maya, which is an animation software, to automate repetitive work. And so he's essentially pivoting to an AI-first company to focus on kind of CPCs, which is co-playable characters, and like workflow automation. So he's kind of touting this as we're going to use AI in various parts of our business. But by saying specifically he didn't care that AI was used in the making of artwork in the video game, I would say it's really spoken like someone who sees the game as a moneymaker and not as a work of art, who doesn't understand what games were supposed to be in the first place. And so he noted that as long as the core gameplay is fun, it doesn't matter to him if developers use generative AI for artwork. And man, that's really messed up, but I think it really shows you kind of the character and the interest of these people who are standing at very high levels in some of these companies. They're financially minded purely. They are not thinking about this as a work of art, which, I mean, it'll be interesting to see how things play out with Xbox as a side note, with Asha Sharma kind of saying the thing that she's saying and really making this all about the players and seeming to understand the family aspect of it, that like we want to play together, we want achievements to be a certain way, seems to like the community aspect, and I like some of the directions that she's going with that. So maybe she, even though she was the head of AI, and when she came in, everybody was very nervous about her, but maybe we're seeing some positive things over at Xbox that we aren't necessarily seeing from places like PUBG. Marathon, the game, basically has reported a staggering budget that they used, a development budget of over $200 million. While its Steam player count has kind of steadily dropped to about a 25,000 player peak, the game definitely isn't facing the same like imminent Concord style shutdown, if you remember when that happened a little while ago. They're not just going to shut down the game and move on, and that's because they have a $200 million budget that they need to make back, or at least put a dent in. Honestly, with a budget that high, the pressure is going to be on for a long time. Bungie is under immense pressure following kind of hardcore streamers noting that Marathon is really punishing and it's kind of a difficult game. The new map that they introduced might be kind of too complex and kind of grind heavy for casual audiences. So they've made a shooter that is really, really targeted towards hardcore, talented video game players who are more talented than me. So like if you're not creating a space for people who only have a little bit of time to play at a time, who only have, an hour to play and they want to have fun and they don't want to basically get kicked back to the beginning because they weren't good enough to keep up. I don't know. I think maybe they've kind of created a problem for themselves by not aiming wide enough with a budget that big. The last story in the news is definitely the most concerning. So Amazon has a company or an organization called Luna. Luna is a product and a service, and it's basically streaming video games. And the idea is, hey, we'll run the video games on our servers at Amazon. We'll use our big, beefy servers and computers to run the video game for you, and we'll stream it to you. And because internet has gotten fast enough, we can do that with very little lag or difference between when you move the controller and what you see on the screen. So what they've done is allowed other like third-party publishers to add their subscriptions. So you could have a subscription to, like EA, for example, or Ubisoft Plus. And you'd be able to play those games from the subscription through Amazon's Luna and never have to have the game installed anywhere on your hard drive, on your computer. You could even plug, a Fire Stick into, well, actually, I don't know if you can use it on a Fire Stick, but basically you plug Luna in anywhere that you can access Luna's service, you can play that game. And what they did this week was to remove the ability to buy games anymore. So you can't buy games. You can just play the games that they offer through the streaming service, exactly like Netflix. And they're taking other games off completely. So if you used to have a game with Ubisoft Plus, well, they're taking that off and you're not going to have access to it. And they're offering no refunds for purchased games. So if you bought a game through Luna that you were playing through Luna, and they don't want to support that game anymore, it's gone. And you can't play it anymore. And in the contract, they'll remind you, well, you actually only paid for the right to play it while it was on the service. So in the same way that Amazon and every other Netflix and every other streaming service will take things off, and there's nothing you can do about it, that's exactly what Luna is doing, except this is with video games that you've purchased. So, this is streaming at its worst. This is the idea that you'll own nothing and you'll like it. Users who relied on Luna to stream really demanding third-party titles that they purchased are effectively locked out unless they move to a competitor like GeForce, for example, GeForce Now. So, yeah, this is obviously streaming kind of the worst side of that. Because if you bought a game and you're expecting somebody else to stream it for you, and now they're shutting down the ability to do that on their servers, and you don't own a machine that's capable of playing that game, you're kind of out of luck. Like, you're not going to be able to do anything about that unless you're planning to buy a big gaming rig and play your game locally. So that's kind of the end of the news. With that negative note, let's move on to the tech bulletin. Can you tell I keep changing my mind on what these segments should be called? If you have a better idea for what the tech piece should be called, man, write me, let me know. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. The only one I'm really married to, I'm married to my wife. Come on. The only idea that I'm really liking is the retro rewind. I like that one. But any of the others, I am open to ideas. So the tech piece, the tech bulletin, the tech announcement, whatever you want to call this. We've got just one piece of news, and it's Steam back in the news again, and again for doing something awesome. I am a fan of Steam. I'm a fan of Valve, not just of the games that they make, but what they have done with Steam and the way that it has been so customer-centric. I really like it. So something that they've found in the code in the latest beta for the Steam. So Steam is not only a program, but it's a marketplace where you can buy video games, and it basically brings all your games together on a PC. Kind of turns it into a console. They even developed what they call big picture mode, where you can basically play it just like you would on a TV. It's very controller friendly. So in their latest version, it shows that Valve is preparing to use the hardware and frame rate data that is collected by the program. So yes, Steam is spying on you a little bit, But what they're doing with that information on your gaming rig, on your computer, is they're collecting that data from millions of users to basically dynamically estimate how well a game will run on a buyer's specific PC setup. So this has always been the rub with PC gaming, is you never know exactly how well something's going to run on your PC because it is custom. You've got, basically a motherboard, a processor, a graphics card, a certain kind of memory. All of that plays together to kind of give you the experience that you get out of that computer. And it's going to be different with every game depending on what the requirements are for that game. Some games are better optimized and they run better than others. And so you never really know. You can kind of look at your specs. You can do a benchmarking test and say, how strong is my computer? Okay, generally it's going to do pretty well with up to this level of game. But you never really know. And you don't certainly have real-time data on how people with a similar computer and graphics card to yours are running this particular game. It's hard to come by. So this is awesome. It's very helpful. I just finished buying, by eBaying parts one at a time, kind of a used PC mid-level gaming rig, which is allowing my kids to play games on PC that otherwise they wouldn't be able to play. It's allowing me to go back and play some old games from like early 2000s. It's been basically a nostalgic dose of happiness in the upstairs of my house. So I've enjoyed it a lot, but this is going to be super helpful for people like me that need to know. It's a very consumer-friendly feature that will be helpful, especially as we come up closer to Valve's Steam Machine consoles and what those are going to look like. So with that, let's talk about a point of view. Today I want to talk briefly about this pivot to cloud services. And how we're going to navigate the future of digital rendering, like how your game actually looks and comes together. So for over 30 years, the gaming industry has really been defined by this like hardware-centric model, which is like the native rendering race. Each generation, consumers buy more powerful silicon chips in their gaming consoles and PCs to process the increasing complexity of things like geometry and resolution and lighting and all the things that happen in video games. And they have been able to do that with hardware at home. So you bought a PS2, then you bought a PS3, and then the PS4. Like, you get the idea. You keep on upgrading. And then the PC gamers are not buying a brand new computer as often as hardware, but they're replacing the graphics card and they're adding more memory. And so we're basically building up the ability to do this. However, we might be reaching what feels like kind of a ceiling where native hardware rendering on individual machines can't keep pace with the creative ambition of the makers of video games and the technologies that they want to include in those video games. So like ray tracing, we talked about that last week a little bit. It turns out takes a lot of computing power to do something like, instead of just saying, hey, computer game, here's where I want the shadow to fall for my character in relation to my character, and here's where I want the light to be generally coming from, and telling it, I want to explain to you the complexities of light, and I want you to render each and every beam of light, every ray of light, to decide for yourself at different points in the game where that light is supposed to fall and not fall, and where it's supposed to be soft and hard shadow. That takes a lot of rendering power to kind of keep up with that. It's very cool, but it does take some beefy hardware in order to accomplish that. So the primary kind of driver of this shift is this growing constraint on physical hardware. And as basically the improvements slow, but the cost of things like semiconductors skyrockets, developers are starting to look towards other solutions other than just getting the next-gen hardware into your home to solve for these problems. And one of the alternatives has been cloud-based processing. So unlike on a local PC or a console, cloud infrastructure allows for kind of infinite scalability because it distributes the work of rendering that across these massive server farms. So instead of owning a super powerful PC in your house that does all the work, you're basically just renting a little bit of space on a server farm someplace. This transition is already visible in technologies like Ace Combat 8's Cloudly engine, which kind of leverages remote processing to achieve these really photorealistic, like weather kinds of things that would crush a standard home CPU. So that's cool. It's allowing us to jump forward faster than we've ever jumped before with this kind of technology. But it does bring a kind of significant paradox, I think, regarding like digital ownership. Do I own the game if it's not running, like Luna's issue, on my computer? And also stability. So if we rely on the cloud for the lion's share of our processing, the consumer is kind of locked into a service model where they own nothing. And we've already seen how that kind of falls apart with something like Amazon Luna. When they removed subscriptions and purchases without offering any kind of refunds. Basically, users are locked out of the content that they had previously planned on being there. Furthermore, a total reliance on the cloud really mirrors kind of the vulnerability of a power outage. I was thinking about this. If servers or the internet go down, our ability to engage with even the most basic video game kind of disappears. The last time that we had like a lengthy power outage in the summer after a really big storm, you kind of walk around the house and realize all the things you can't do because we rely on power for so much. Oh, I guess I can't get on my computer and we'll just watch a show. Oh, no, we can't do that either. Well, I have an iPad with the battery. Oh, nope, I can't do that either because I can't stream anything without the internet. You kind of start to run into the same problem, though, with cloud-based stuff. So I run into this all the time with video editing for my day job. There's a lot of services that are offering really cool editing features through software that is hosted in the cloud. And some days, either my internet's slow or the cloud isn't cooperating, their servers are having an issue, and I just can't work. Like, I have to move on and go do something else until it comes back on. So ultimately, the industry is kind of diverging from its historical path of having hardware-based things in home to this like cloud-based infrastructure. And I think big data modeling, like what Valve is doing with Steam, can certainly help users to optimize their existing hardware. But the long-term trajectory really does point towards a very server-based world. And I don't know if that's healthy for development in the medium, in the midterm. While it enables this like incredible visual fidelity, it will also kind of drive a massive surge of people who become frustrated with their inability to do that consistently. And so maybe this is the thing that really drives a lot of people back to retro games for a while, where players are kind of seeking this like security and feel of authentic, locally stored experiences that don't just disappear because the internet happened to go down when you were in the middle of something, playing something. So we'll see what happens long term, but those are kind of my thoughts on why maybe we shouldn't be quite so quick to jump into the cloud headfirst. With that, let's move on to the Retro Rewind. There's some fun stuff happening in the news with retro games this week. One of them was Roller Coaster Tycoon 2. A player is still playing that and made the longest roller coaster ever. So what he did was basically manipulated the memory limits and the guest AI statistics to build what he called the Google coaster because the ride used basically a whole bunch of synchronized super modules right next to each other in the game and forced guests to survive by directing their pathing to just specific benches and food stalls to basically maintain their energy and keep them riding the rides over and over. It sounds perfectly horrendous and exactly like what we used to do in The Sims. When you play The Sims and you'd, create a character and give them a whole bunch to eat and drink and then lock them out of the bathroom so that they couldn't use the bathroom. Or like lock them in a room and not let them out of it and just kind of like torture these poor little Sims. Maybe I'm the only one who was messed up and did horrible things like this to my Sims. Gosh, maybe that says something about me and how much I need Jesus for sure. But I think this is hilarious. Also kind of fun that people are still playing games like Roller Coaster Tycoon 2. So on a related note, my wife doesn't really play video games very often, mostly because she's just busy. And so one of the perks of having this computer that I built for upstairs was it's just sitting there at the desk. And so one day I asked her last week, hey, what's one of your favorite video games? She said Roller Coaster Tycoon from when I was a kid. So I got it and had to work on it for a little while to get it to run on a modern PC. There's some hoops to jump through there, but I got it to run. And she's like, okay, move over, let me play. And she played for like a couple of hours that afternoon. And I think the funniest thing was she really enjoyed it. And later when she looked at her watch, it said like, hey, look at this weird like multi-hour session in the afternoon where my stress was almost zero. It was the lowest it's been all day. It was exactly the time frame that she was playing Roller Coaster Tycoon and making her little guests happy. Because sometimes little guests on a roller coaster in a fake world in a video game are easier to keep happy than kids, for sure. So that's kind of fun. There's another handheld, a retro handheld. There's a company called Game MT that has been making retro handhelds for a while. I don't own any of their products, but I know that they've been in the game for a bit. And they're working on this like modular display. So basically, it's a display that is removable and can be swapped out with a MagSafe mount for a phone. So you can swap the controls basically for either your phone or for this removable screen. It looks like the price is still kind of up in the air. It's going to run at a resolution of about 720-ish, so not bad for a small screen. I think these are interesting. Part of me really loves the weird things that these retro handhelds are doing because they just kind of do what they want. And it's weird and it's fun and it's wonderful. But the other part of me is like, there's so many legitimate opportunities for like more dual screen devices so we can play Nintendo DS games. What about like motion devices so that we can play Wii games again that aren't available anyplace else? So part of me wishes that some of these companies would focus on things like that might appeal to a larger number of people. There's a big push to have companies like Analog. So Analog made a Game Boy that is basically, it looks and feels exactly like a Game Boy. And so the thing that like the community has been asking for is please, please, please make a version of the Analog that is a Game Boy Advance, because that is for a lot of us, our favorite system. There's a reason I mentioned it in the intro. Some of my best video game memories aren't even on a modern console at all. They're on a Game Boy Advance from when I was a kid. So it would be cool to see more of those things being made. The last piece of news is the Pokemon Leaf Green, recently available via the Switch, which is pretty awesome. Very excited about Fire Red and Leaf Green being available on a modern console. These are great Pokemon games. I think probably the best version of the first-gen Pokemon games. I still like to play those old ones in black and white, but that's mostly nostalgia. Honestly, they're just better put together. They look better. They play better in these versions for the Game Boy Advance and now on the Switch. There has been some chatter about like cheat codes, because that was a thing back in the day for Pokemon games. Do you use a cheat code? You could get, endless money. You could get endless Pokeballs, Master Balls, right? Like lots of solutions to the problems that you face in Pokemon that are most frustrating. So there's a whole bunch of cheats for them. And the question was, can you use those cheats with the modern version? And the answer is no. So those cheats basically rely on adding some code into the ROM. And in order to do that, you would have to basically bypass the Nintendo Switch platform that's being played on. So no, they don't support, the modern version on the Switch doesn't support those cheats, which is kind of a bummer. And maybe another reason you might want to still hold on to those ROMs. If you have those original cartridges, you have those games, maybe still hold on to those because you might still want to play them. And again, I like that you own the version this time. I'm really happy that they decided to sell these as standalone versions instead of part of their subscription service, because it would be harder for Nintendo to take it away. But you do really need to think about, like, where am I going to play this in the future if they decide to not support it any longer? So with that, let's move on to the game list. Starting with Nintendo, we have the Pokemon Champions launch that occurred this week. And honestly, it hasn't been great. So there's been some concern over things that are missing. They only had 186 Pokemon, which is a lot fewer than the 1,000 that are available. So you guys, if you're going to make that many Pokemon, you're going to probably have to support closer to half of them than 20% at 186 Pokemon total. And then the standard 6 versus 6 matchmaking is not a part of the game. There's also a really nasty bug that showed up in the game, which made Switch 2 players have to manually undock and redock their console at startup just to trigger the graphics profile that actually plays the game in 4K. So this game is free to start. It has an optional $50 a year subscription. But there's also like microtransactions that are in this game that really have the potential to turn it into a money suck. So I think a few thoughts. I think we've reached a day where gamers are really getting weary of half-baked products. I don't know that there's a lot of grace for games that launch like this, especially from Nintendo, and aren't everything that they're made out to be. And I think people are often just going to move on. All of the reviews and descriptions for this have been basically like very middle of the road, if not negative. The microtransactions definitely play into that. There's missing items, the frame rate drops that happen even when the game is just kind of idling. Not great for a game that could have really brought together a lot of people who liked Pokemon a lot. So hopefully they patch that and it gets better. But again, I think you have to be real careful about releasing games that aren't quite finished and polished at this point in time. There's been more talk about the future of the Zelda series. No new news about the remake of Zelda. A lot of talk about the movie made off of Zelda that's supposed to be coming. And basically the question of whether Link was going to speak in the game. So all of the Zelda games up until this point, Link has not spoken because Link is you. Link is supposed to represent you in the game. And so of course he doesn't speak because the minute that you make a character speak, they become a them and not a you. And Nintendo has pulled us into the world of Zelda by having Link be voiced by us, right? Other than the yeah and the random sounds in there. So the question is, do you make him speak? And in the movie, and the art director for Majora's Mask publicly stated that having Link speak was actually going to ruin the franchise's magic. So he's saying that if this happens in the movie, it's going to ruin the franchise of the games. It's going to ruin Zelda, period. I think that's silly. I don't think that it's going to ruin anything. In fact, if you look at good example, the Mario movie has done really, really well. Both of them now. Kids love it. Families love it. The critics are kind of split on whether this is a serious movie or not because critics need to maybe just take a break from seeing movies. Okay, go hang out with your kids. Do normal things. Play with some Legos and then come back with a sense of wonder reinstilled so that you can enjoy a movie like the Super Mario Galaxy movie. That's a side note. Having a character speak is kind of necessary in a movie in a way that it isn't in a game, because in a movie, you are not the character. That's not the point. It's a different type of media. So when they made the Mario movie and they decided to hire Chris Pratt to voice Mario, he's done a tremendous job. But I remember watching an interview from him from a couple of years ago, and he said, I had to decide whether or not I was going to do the, it's a me, Mario. Like, was I going to give him a weird Italian-ish accent and try to copy that for all of my lines, or was I just going to be myself? And I decided it was time to reinvent the character. Like, the Mario on screen was different from the one in the game. And so I'm going to lend it my voice. And he did a great job. And he delivered the lines well. Chris Pratt, really hilarious. So I think that you can do the same thing with Zelda. And you can have Link speak. And he can be his own version of Link in the film. And not ruin the franchise just because Link decided to say something at long last. some news about the game Super Mario Maker 2. You can tell there's not a ton of games coming out on Switch 2 right now because we're talking about old games. But Nintendo has started removing like a lot of levels. So Super Mario Maker 2 lets people create their own levels and then upload them and other people can play them. So it's like this perfect little community where you're playing other people's work and it's pretty awesome. However, Nintendo has been removing like to the tune of thousands of these player-made levels because they say that it is a form of advertising, some of these levels, and it's breaking the basically agreement, the user agreement for making these levels because you're not supposed to do advertising or spam. So you don't want to make like advertising words made out of the blocks in the game that people would play and it would be some type of advertising. I appreciate that. I appreciate that Nintendo said something about that. However, it looks like a lot of these ones that are being taken down are being taken down because of the use of a hashtag in the level's name. So like hashtag Team Shell is its title or description. And Nintendo says hashtags are a form of advertising, so you can't do that. And they're even threatening to restrict their Nintendo accounts if the violations continue. So I assume we'll see more on this. It seems like kind of a silly kind of crackdown for Nintendo to take, but maybe there's more to this story than first meets the eye. I guess we'll kind of have to wait and see what happens there. A new game called Rhythm Heaven Groove has basically the first Rhythm Heaven game in a decade has actually locked in a date. So it will be releasing on July 2nd for $39.99. And this is probably, I think there's been some rumors about whether or not a big lineup of really big games is going to start coming out of Nintendo as we approach this summer. Rhythm Heaven could be the beginning of that kind of lineup. So we'll have to kind of keep an eye on that if that's like the first part of a wave of new games coming out. I'm sure we'll find out in the next couple of months here. Nintendo Switch Online added some games. So Pac-Man, Game Freak's 1989 puzzle game called Mendel Palace, and then the 1984 arcade classic The Tower of Druaga are hitting the NES app this month, actually April 9th. So 2 days ago, they came out. I love that there's preservation going on here. The catalog expansion for Nintendo Switch Online subscribers continues to expand. Love that. And then also there's been an update for Pokemon Pokepia. Basically, it's a patch that kind of fixed some of the bugs that were causing like Pokemon habitats to disappear. So one of the bugs made a controller vibrate endlessly, which is kind of hilarious. If you picture a kid just playing with a vibrating controller for an hour, that's hilarious to me. I don't know. Maybe it's just because I have kids who would freak out and come running and tell me that the controller was exploding. Anyway, they did add some other stuff, some updates to the habitats too. So that's kind of fun that they're still updating that as they should. It's been an enormous game. A lot of people are still playing that. On the PlayStation side, there's a cool thing that PlayStation did with what they call the Player Base Initiative. So this is a service that will basically take a 3D scan of fans' likenesses and then put them into like big first-party titles. They're starting with Gran Turismo 7, putting the winner of a contest in-game as a character portrait alongside like custom vehicles. So they're taking applications for that now. It's a 3D scanning tool, so I assume you're going to have to go someplace to get scanned, but I think this is really cool. This is less AI and more like actual people in games. How cool is that? Yes, please. Let's have more of this. 007 First Light is a James Bond game coming out, and it is on schedule for May 27th on PS5, Xbox, and PC. And they delayed the release on Switch 2 by a little bit. And so that'll be coming out probably sometime during the summer. It's a massive return to gaming for James Bond. I've read a couple of articles kind of previewing it. It's going to be a big deal. I think this might be the biggest Bond game since we had GoldenEye on the N64. So excited for that. The game Cyberpunk 2077 has had some enhancements on the PlayStation 5 Pro. It's added a free update, which adds that upscaling, the PSSR upscaling, also ray tracing. So there's basically 3 different modes depending on what you want to drive, frame rate or the appearance of textures and everything. So they kind of are putting that technology into the current gen PS5 Pro. That's pretty awesome. I think there's a lot of potential still in the current gen hardware. So even if you're spending a ton of money on a PS5 Pro, we talked about how expensive those have gotten. That's probably a platform that's going to serve you for a long, long time. So I would say you might still be able to get your money's worth out of that. As opposed to buying a, let's just say, $3,000 gaming PC that you're going to have to upgrade parts on at some point in the very near future. Yeah, that's a little more of a toss-up for me. Ace Combat 8, The Wings of Thieve, I think is how you say that, is a project that talked about earlier, their Cloudly engine. They're using a new lighting system. It is aimed at creating a deeply immersive, photorealistic, like light-sensitive weather, next-gen aerial combat. These are the kinds of things that they're talking about with this game. I love the idea. It's going to be exciting to see what they can actually accomplish with strong hardware like the PS5. It's basically, this is a series that's been around for 30 years, and they're completely rebuilding the tech for the current generation systems. And I'm guessing on a PS5 Pro, this is going to look incredible. I can't wait to see that coming out. Okay, let's talk Xbox. So Forza Horizon 6, I talked about last week on social media a little bit because they were announcing that they were adding ray tracing to the game, specifically on the PC. I would be curious to see if they're going to add that to the Xbox Series X, because I think the power is there to actually do that. But it's moving the map to Japan, and it's going to feature things like the neon mazes of Tokyo, basically unsealed grassroots tracks, cherry blossom mountain passes, like 65-foot snow walls in the Alps. The preview build was locked into 30 FPS. So people who were previewing it did kind of complain about the frame rate being low, but the final game will feature a 60 FPS performance option. So if you really are there for the frame rate, which does make sense in a racing game, that option will be available in the final build. That is coming out on May 19th. It will be on Game Pass. And this is actually what I loved about these games in the first place, was these beautiful open worlds, areas that you can just drive around and explore. They're adding more things to find, more like tourism mechanics, so things that you can explore and find, and races that you can join at any time. It's going to be kind of like the ultimate cozy game for car lovers. So I'm excited about this. I'm not a big car fan or even a big racing fan, other than Mario Kart, which I'm actually wearing a Mario Kart jacket that I got for Christmas. So that's kart racing, though. That's different. But I loved Forza Horizon, so I'm excited to play 6 at some point. There was an update for Starfield, the Free Lanes update. This is what they said their biggest update yet was. It is dropping alongside the Terran Armada DLC. Basically, it introduces this cruise mode space flight between planets. And so that's kind of like a quality of life experience thing. They're adding some equipment crafting, a new moon jumper land vehicle, and also just optimization for the terminal for ships. So lots of changes coming to Starfield. I know they said that they aren't going to completely revamp the game, but they are making some improvements to it. That came out this past week, so this might be, if you haven't played Starfield yet, I have not, this might be your best chance yet to experience the best version of Starfield. And honestly, I think we can thank a little bit the fact that this has been opened up and has come to PlayStation. So when you have a game that's opened up to a whole new audience, there's more ability to continue supporting that game. So frankly, Xbox players, I think we can thank Xbox for releasing this game to also being playable on PS5. We can thank that decision for continuing support and continuing to improve this game. A couple additions to Game Pass in April. Looks like we've got Modern Warfare was the big one that came to Game Pass, a game from 2019, which is crazy that is already as far away as it is. That came to Game Pass along with a game called Planet Coaster 2 and a handful of others. So that's nice that Game Pass continues to grow if you are a subscriber. There's a couple new improvements to achievements. This was on the Xbox side. This is happening over the next couple of months. So some of it's just quality of life updates, like the ability to hide specific games from their achievement history, their visible history. So if I were to let my daughter play, I don't know, Barbie, what was it? It was like Barbie horse stable princess, some like conglomeration of random words that they thought this will hook in like 10 and 11-year-old girls, that kind of game. So if I were to have her play a game like that and she got achievements for it, I could hide it from my achievements. That's kind of a nice thing for parents. We don't want all of our the Paw Patrol game achievements showing up on our achievements for that year, on our year in rewind. Wow, you played 200 hours of Paw Patrol. I don't know how anyone would play 200 hours of Paw Patrol. Those games are the worst games I've maybe ever played. Full stop. I don't know why you do that to a kid. Make a lovely character like the characters from Paw Patrol, those sweet little puppy dogs, and put them into a completely obnoxious video game. Shame on you. Okay, that's all. The other things coming out were to visually highlight your 100% completed games. If you have a game that you've 100%ed, you're able to now highlight that in your history. They also changed like what color you want the pop-up animation to be. If your theme is a different color and you don't want the green to pop up, you can change the color on that. So I love achievements. I don't really obsess about them. I guess I'm not like good enough at video games to really 100% a lot of games. I have friends who are. So this is kind of, it seems like a minimal thing, but I love that they're still improving things there. A couple games coming out this week for Xbox. There's one called Mouse PI for Hire, which looks like a pretty fun little game. It's like set in the 1930s. It's really interesting. We'll have to maybe talk about that after it comes out. Finally, under the PC category, Crimson Desert continues to get updates. Basically, players are starting to realize that once they clear out the camps of enemies, they don't come back. And so there's a complaint that basically the world is getting too peaceful because no enemy respawns. I think that's kind of awesome, actually, because you're able to actually transform the world. If you think about Zelda, Breath of the Wild, you defeat Ganon at the end and you've defeated the enemies kind of over and over again, and then the enemies just keep coming back. And so there's no sense of like, I fixed the world. I did something permanent. So the idea of, just because you can, in the same way you influence the environment and you leave footprints and all of those types of things, graphically, the fact that you actually clear enemies out, I think that's really cool. And if you really think the game is too dead and boring, I would say go start again. Like, play it again. That's one legitimate way to fix that problem, is to go clear out the world again, make it peaceful again. I kind of am a fan of this idea. There was an update to No Man's Sky that added Pokemon-style turn-based tactical creature battles, they said. So basically, they added Pokemon to No Man's Sky. Only like the ugliest Pokemon you've ever seen. And so you can battle aliens across like 8 elemental affinities. There's multiplayer. It's a kind of fun thing. No Man's Sky, I tried to play last year, and this is a mashup I never expected to see. And I must say, I was not a huge fan of No Man's Sky, not because it wasn't fun or because you couldn't do anything in it. My goodness, the world is wide open. You can do so much. This game can be everything. And I think that was my frustration with it, is I needed it to be something specific and limited. And it was so big that I just felt like I wasn't ever making any progress with the amount of time that I had to play it. So there's a game that launched called Samson, which was launched to kind of compete with Grand Theft Auto. And so not the type of game that I would typically play, but I did want to call out the reason that this made the news was actually because it didn't get very good reviews. And there was a bunch of like game-breaking stutters, missing animations, like input delays. And it was kind of crazy that a game that was supposed to be high quality was released in such a not finished condition. And the the creative director basically said, we released a game with flaws, and we did it for a number of reasons. He said that these performance issues were unacceptable, but he said, we've been working on this for many long years, and basically we'll issue a day 2 patch that deals with some of these issues. I think the question, though, is why not, instead of releasing a day 2 patch, why not release the game 2 days later and have it be right? Why not give people the right thing in the first place? Like, I guess I don't understand. Are you not doing the appropriate amount of testing? Like, hire a handful of gamers to play your game for a while and give you feedback. And you're going to be much better off when it comes time to actually launch the game. So I'm curious to see kind of what the discussion is around this, but this is something that I am seeing coming up quite often is we don't have a lot of patience for big errors and issues in games that should have been fixed before they were released. So why do studios think they can continue to do that? Another game is Super Meat Boy 3D. We talked about that releasing. It is only $25. There's actually a handful of indie games that came out along with that. There's like a deck builder. There's one called Animal Kind where you get to pilot mechs. That looks pretty cool. A handful of indie games. I'm going to ask for recommendations for indie games because there's so many of them. What's some indie games that you've played that we should definitely highlight? I have a PC now that will play some of those indie games. And so I'm interested to go back and see like what games have I missed by being a console player primarily for the last like 10, 15 years. One more game that I'm interested in that would be on the PC first is Plants vs. Zombies 3, which they have now soft launched for the 3rd time. So this one relies on a new mechanic that allows players to merge different plant species. So full disclosure, I'm a big Plants vs. Zombies fan. And I am confused about why they continue to delay the next Plants vs. Zombies game. I played the remaster. I played Plants vs. Zombies 2, but it was only on mobile, so that was weird. That didn't really like wrap me in the same way. And so as a fan, I'm kind of starting to wonder what the heck happened to this franchise. It's been in a 10-year development that is filled with scrapped 3D graphics, rejected neighborhood avatars, all kinds of issues. So this might be something I have to dig into in the future because this one is out now again, but it's only on iOS and Android. So Plants vs. Zombies was a cultural force of nature, like made a huge influence. And then it just kind of fell apart. It should have been so much more than it was. So I'm curious to see what's going on with that and whether they will introduce anything new, potentially for other platforms for that game. All right, so that brings us to the end of today's episode. Lest I run over on time, part of what I wanted to do on this show is to create a community. And I always found like my next favorite games by asking my friends. And I still ask my friends what their favorite games are, but not all of my friends are still playing video games on a regular basis. And so I want to be a resource. Like this podcast could be a great resource for that. So the question for this month, I've decided to do a monthly question instead of weekly questions. And so that allows us to collect a few more answers. So the question for this month, I'll collect them until the end of April, and I'll share them at the end of April. The question is this: what is your favorite game, new or old, that you've played in the last year? And what made it great? Why would you recommend it to other people to play? I'd love to read your answers on the last episode of this month. I think it makes a great way to maybe find your next video game. So I'll also have posts out on social media with this question. If you follow me there, it's at The Game Adventure. But you can also email me your answer directly at thisisthegameadventure@gmail.com anytime you like. Have a fantastic week, and I will see you next Saturday.